morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Scott, your host, and my co-host is
Tarik.
Hello, Tarik. This is Scott here once again. Thank you for joining us. We are recording in from ASEAN, and this is your favorite youth channel, TAP, the AYO podcast. Thank you for joining us. And today we have a very special speaker, and she goes by the name of. Please introduce yourself because I scared I pronounced your name wrong.
Thank you so much, Scott. What a lovely introduction. That I'm special. I'm a regular speaker amongst the many you have already interviewed in the past weeks. My name is Leonie Nagarajan. And if you want to know what's special about that, maybe just my name, because Leonie means like a lion and Nagarajan is the king of the snakes. So in that regard, maybe special.
But I do want to jump into a bit about how we're kind of delivering education during these times. We're moving very rapidly towards online courses and certifications, all of which are provided digitally. Do you think that there would be some kind of transformation where teachers wouldn't be considered as the primary facilitator of education? I mean, what is your view on this?
Okay, so when you talk about transformation of teacher or the role of teacher, I think probably the question which you want to ask is, will teachers be replaced at some point? Because we have so many online courses and we have practiced enough online teaching and learning over the last year. And we had an interesting project a few years ago, 1.5 years ago. Time flies quickly, but it feels with COVID-19 that like you lose a little bit the sense of time, where we talked about this issue in particular as well. And we also asked this question our teachers who are the ones concerned. And it's a little bit Shakespearean because it is like to be or not to be. I mean, that's the question, will there be a teacher in the future or not? And the answer to that is, speaking in the theater language, there will always be a role for teachers. The question is just, do they take the lead role or do they take a supportive role? And that always depends on what are their acting skills and what are their performance skills and competences. And in this context, I had a nice interaction with a Finnish teacher who drew my attention to French illustrators from the late 19th century. So they had, you might have heard about it. They created an illustration called the Year 2000. So they were Jean-Marc Coté, and the other one is called Vilma, and they did a number of drawings, illustrations, how the future could look like, technology could look like in the future, and how it would penetrate our life. So they had early illustrations on housewives with electrical mopping machines, which is maybe today the Roomla. But they had one very interesting drawing also of a classroom where you had the teacher in one corner and the students obediently sitting on their chairs. And the teacher was behind a desk with books like a DJ. And the books were all wired with the brains of the students. So that role of the teacher was very clear. It's just conveying of knowledge. And that's obviously too narrow-minded, and you cannot simplify the role of a teacher as such, because it is much more. So if you look now at the context of online learning and teaching, you still have this role of conveying knowledge. And I think here the technology and online courses can assist teachers very well, be it now through simple apps or like rather courses where certain forms of teaching and learning can be enhanced, like be it now teaching basic context or training and learning like very repetitive things. But when it comes to the actual role of education, and that is independent if it's online or if it's like face-to-face, and that is we want to shape students, we want to equip them that they can lead a meaningful life, and we want to understand the world around them. You cannot expect this from any kind of online course. I mean, no online course will teach you civil courage. No online course will teach empathy. So it's an interesting topic, and I think you need the teachers for that too. And you need the teachers as facilitators, as the connector for this kind of social interaction, which is very, very important.
Very true. I mean, teachers are vessels. You're providing knowledge that's in words, that's in ideas. But how do you contextualize that knowledge with the world, and how do you make sense of it for children? That are very fragile, that they're very vulnerable. So for that purpose, teachers are very, very important. I kind of appreciate that answer quite a lot. Scott, do you want to ask the next question?
Yes, most definitely I would. And I especially this question which you've answered, Leonie, I really like it because I am a student of the arts as a performer. There is actually no very little concept as to how you're supposed to teach someone of the arts. You can't have a textbook. You need to have a passion, a fire burning inside you for that. And I really like to ask you furthermore on the aspect of education. So do you think there is a strong urgency in reforming Asia, especially the continent of Asia, especially in Southeast Asia, in the aspect of education with the purpose of decolonizing the system, considering that many of the Asian countries were colonial land? A little bit more complex, this question, but I'll think about this. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. It's a very complex question. It's also a little bit of a tricky question, because who are you asking? I mean, you see me right now. I'm not male, I'm female, but I'm white, and I have been educated in a Western system. So, and there's a quite strong quote and thought by an American activist called Audre Lorde, and she says, "You do not ask the master. The master's tools will not dismantle the master's house." So if you ask me about decolonization, you are asking basically somebody who has benefited from the system. And giving an answer to this question is very tricky, because understanding the complexity of colonization, of decolonization, is whichever answer I would give you, it would not be complete. It would be probably overlooking so many voices and views of those who have raised it, and who have to be heard in that context more than me. And these are voices from the indigenous population, from minorities. So when it comes in general to decolonizing education systems, I mean, there has been, and maybe just like 3 points on that. I think in the last year or 1 or 2 years, we have seen several initiatives and protests worldwide about it. And I think it's important that we are looking into questions identity, race, gender. So I think we are on the right path. And higher education has picked it up in several ways. And it's also good to see that it's not only an initiative or protest led by students. I mean, there are professors, there's administrative staff which has joined in. But at the same time, I mean, a lot of initiatives are also well-intentional pledges. We have to understand that. So after pledges come then the action. And then the question is, what kind of actions are we doing? When you talk about decolonizing an education system, probably the first step, or what people think about, is we look in the curriculum. Or we look into diversifying staff or diversifying students, but this is diversification. This is not necessarily decolonization. So these are two different things. One helps the other, but it's not really a sincere approach, or a full approach to the whole process of decolonization. I think there are only humble steps which we can take right now. And as somebody who is white, who comes from a system, I think those who are in the system, the advice or the thought I can give is we always have to be aware of our own existence, because our own existence is sometimes also a statement, or can be a very strong statement, and we take space up, which others could actually take. So that's my response. Probably more complex, and I'm not answering the question fully, but you can have a great IAPS conference and summit on that topic itself.
Yep, we most certainly can. Well, yes, actually, yeah, talking about this systematic things towards education, especially, I might be chatting rubbish because I do not have much knowledge on this topic. But I think in another way of saying this is that you are technically having none. You, the listener, is having none systematic approach to education because you're here listening to this podcast. So that's an informal way of education. And I believe that is somewhat insystematic, if that is a word. So let me push this to my colleague before I
Yeah.
further embarrass myself. Thank you very much.
uh, so you talked about diversification, and in a lot of ways, the education system has diversified with the inclusion of digital platforms. With education moving completely digital, some of the higher education institutions, universities, are doing quite well actually, handling themselves during the pandemic, digitalizing their entire studies modules, even the professors getting on board, and finding themselves with a rhythm to be able to teach students online. Do you think that this whatever is happening at the backdrop of COVID is the beginning of the end for on-site education? Do you anticipate that happening at all?
Okay, so first of all, there is never an end of any education. Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's face to face, if it's on site. So it's not the mode of delivery, it's not the style. Is it formal, non-formal, informal? Is it written? Is it oral? So there's never an end. That's I think the first thing.
Yeah.
But I think comparing what is happening face to face and an on-site education is really tricky because they're complementing each other and you're comparing apples and oranges. Both work with different in different ways, and it's rather what we see is it's rather a question of how can we find the right pedagogy to make both work well. And it's true that last year, due to COVID, I mean, the whole online education systems development has been accelerated. And you heard, I remember in May, June, you heard like a number of universities boasting, we have converted 10,000 of courses online. But how were they converted online? And if you go back, I mean, sorry, but some of these online courses, they looked like bad TV shows. Be a bit blunt right now here, but that's the case. So,
True.
So the purpose is the same. It's about the knowledge creation, the knowledge sharing, the knowledge transfer, the skills development, but the way how it is conducted has to be very different. And at the end, they are complementing each other both.
Very, very interesting. How you think that there is a complementary relation between what is emerging in the digital education sector and what already was established with on-site education. I, for one, actually endorse what you're saying. I think there's going to be a hybrid model of education going forward, where we will have rapid digitalization, but we will try and anchor it in all our teachings that we found in on-site education. So I completely understand where you're coming from. And it's going to take some time, I believe, for us to kind of find the right footing to be able to kind of maximize our utilization of digital platforms, because as it is, it's still quite new. And I, for one, am very worried, and I don't know if we can take up it later, but I'm worried about the digital divide as well, because if you're moving too quickly to digital education, where does this leave the global south at, or where does it leave the more developing nations or underdeveloped nations who do not have the right digital infrastructure to be able to cope up with this?